Well, join me now is Congresswoman Ashley Hinson. She's a member of the House Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. So you tweeted this Saturday in response to the balloon being shot down over the Atlantic. I want to read it for our viewers. You said, add this to the list of national security failures by Biden. The administration knowingly allowed the CCP's spy balloon to float across our entire country, including over military bases, a shameless violation of our sovereign airspace and a clear provocation. The military has said all along, Congresswoman, that this balloon posed no national security threat, and that led many to interpret that the military being capable of jamming this balloon in some form and thus disabling it from collecting any information. If that is the case, then what exact national security threat did it pose?
Well, to be frank, Bianna, this is a brazen provocation by the Chinese Communist Party. It's why we absolutely need to be standing up as Americans and waking up to this new Cold War that we're facing with the Chinese Communist Party. They've got 215 million of these weather balloons in the form of TikTok on Americans' phones. So they're continuing to gather this intelligence. It's high time that we shut down the surveillance operation that the Chinese have on the ground and in the air. So I think Americans, certainly Iowans, are skeptical of the fact that this balloon was able to fly over, hover over Montana, hover over our Air Force bases in Missouri, and not gather any information and beam it back to Communist China to be used against us. So I think those are the questions that we want serious answers to, but we have to make sure that there is a plan from the Biden administration and our military to make sure this isn't allowed to happen again.
What about the counter-argument that during this time it was able to gather intelligence that perhaps the balloon was transmitting back to China and thus being productive from an intelligence standpoint for the United States?
Well, I think it's highly concerning either way. We should not be allowing them to execute an agenda across our country. The mission was allowed to be completed going all the way to South Carolina. You can't tell me with only a 7-mile radius there wasn't a place where they could have shot this down and then continue to gather that intelligence of what made up this balloon and how it was being used. But it's very clear that this is a very sophisticated spy operation that's been in the works for many, many years. We know this has been taking place over many administrations. So, again, this was a test. President Biden failed that test by allowing it to work its way across our entire country, and Americans deserve answers to why that decision was made.
Do Americans also deserve answers as to why it looks like we are finally learning why 3 balloons, Chinese intelligence gathering balloons, were able to cross along the United States being undetected during the Trump administration without top officials being aware of this, including the Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, it seems the former president himself. We're just hearing that a domain awareness gap allowed them to go undetected. Is that not a national security threat, and how alarming is that?
Absolutely, it's alarming, Bianna. I think when you look at what's been able to be allowed by the Chinese Communist Party over the last decade through, again, several administrations, we've seen them ramp up their surveillance on us. Again, this is a very sophisticated espionage apparatus that they've been able to execute for many, many years. So Americans should absolutely be concerned about this threat. It's, again, why we have propped up in a bipartisan way the Select Committee on Competition with the Chinese Communist Party. And I want to be very clear here. The Chinese Communist Party is a very real threat to Americans. We have no beef with the Chinese people. It's about the continued provocation by the military apparatus and the Chinese Communist Party. So that's what our committee is looking to challenge, to make sure that the Chinese know we're taking these threats very, very seriously. And again, that's why you're hearing these calls for questions about when we knew about these devices coming across our country, why was this allowed to persist as it has been, and how are we going to make sure we have a plan going forward so it can't be allowed to continue.
Yeah, it appeared that it was the Biden administration that actually informed the Trump administration of these 3 balloons that had gone undetected. Are you hoping to get more clarity, perhaps an investigation into how that was allowed to happen, this domain awareness gap?
Well, absolutely. We need to make sure that our military has the resources and tools necessary to be able to detect. We're facing new threats every single day, and we need to be nimble and be able to react to those threats. But this is very, very clear, again, about making sure that we have a path forward, get answers to those questions, but we cannot allow this to happen again.
All right, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, thank you for your time.